The wind off Steen's Mountain hits the skin like cold steel darts. Horses show the whites of their eyes and shelter flank to flank. On the slopes, sage and juniper and bunchgrass tilt to leeward. When common herds of cattle roamed this high desert country, cowboys had no trouble separating out the Steen's animals. They stepped on their hay as they ate. On a cool spring day in 1968, Bob Wallace was driving along the dirt road that runs for 60 miles under the jagged bluffs of the Steen's Massif. The wind blew from the 9,354-foot peak, and the rain came in bursts and gusts. As usual, the huge volcanic lump was creating its own weather. In his time on the mountain, Wallace had seen far worse blows. Sometimes the wind drove snow and sleet off Steen's faster than the wipers could handle. Electrical storms played across the face, and the mountain hummed like a turbine, filling the air with ozone. Bob Wallace, a gritty young cowboss, kind of enjoyed it. The rain made the grass grow sweet and tall. Up ahead, he saw a man approaching on foot in a steady, rolling gait. In this bleak part of Oregon, where neighbors lived 20 or 30 miles apart and the drive to market took 2 hours at highway speed, pedestrians were an unexpected sight, especially in rainstorms. Wallace braked and rolled down his window. "You lost?" he called out. The stranger blew a raindrop off his upturned nose and said, "Nope." Wallace looked into the brown eyes of a teenager, built sturdy and low to the ground. "I'm heading for the Alvord Ranch," the kid said. As he spoke, water beaded up on his steel-rimmed glasses. His pack hung almost to his knees. Wallace told him he was headed right. The Alvord was his home ranch, the biggest spread in the Steen's area, owned by timber millionaires named Wilson. The kid hitched up his pack and asked if anybody was hiring. "Check in," Wallace answered in a friendly voice. As a top hand on the 300,000 acres, he knew that the Alvord could always use a good man, especially in the spring, but the work was hard, and the drifters who popped up these days, draft evaders, hippies, winos, malcontents, were seldom worth the trouble it took to sign them in. He asked the kid where he was coming from. "Burns." The voice was barely audible. "Took me 2 days to get this far." Burns, Oregon, was 70 miles away in the middle of mixed grazing lands and moonscapes. Wallace asked how he'd traveled. "Mostly walking," the kid answered, stepping away. "How much does that pack weigh?" "Oh, maybe 50 pounds. "How far can you walk in a day?" "About 40 miles if I run a little." Several hours later, 2 women were chatting in a small red house on the Alvord Ranch when the doorbell rang. Mary Wilson cast a surprised glance at her mother-in-law, ranch owner Constance Coco Wilson, a middle-aged woman of aristocratic mien. The older woman mused aloud, "Now who in the world—" "I can't imagine," Mary Wilson interrupted. No one ever rang or knocked. The ranch house was a mile from the dirt road, and folks who drove this far back toward the mountain were usually friends or ranch hands who howdied and walked in Western style. The women opened the door on a clean-shaven young man who introduced himself as Claude Dallas. He seemed a little embarrassed, so soft-spoken that they had to strain to hear his words. His clothes looked neat, and so did he. When he asked if the ranch could use a hand, they told him that the hiring was done by Supervisor Hoyt Wilson, Coco's son, Mary's husband. But would he like a cup of tea? He accepted with a deferential smile. Coco Wilson, a graduate of Miss Chapin's school in New York and a relative of the DuPonts, was impressed by the way the young man called her ma'am and pulled out her chair at the table. Lean and tanned, Coco could ride and rope and cuss cows with the best of the Alvord's hands, but there were moments when she missed the grace notes of her upper Fifth Avenue upbringing. Steen's mountain men wouldn't pull out chairs for the Queen of England.